Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you this evening to our candidate forum for City of Richardson Mayoral and City Council selection. I'm Evan Thomas. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Richardson. The League of Women Voters of Richardson is sponsoring the forum this evening to help Richardson voters learn where the candidates stand on the issues. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization which never supports or opposes candidates. If you're interested in joining the League of Women Voters, pick up one of our membership brochures on the table in the foyer or fill out a membership application on our website. Membership is open to men and women of all ages. Early voting dates and times are located on the back cover of your program. Further information about this election, including our voter's guide and an additional candidate questionnaire, can be found on the League of Women Voters of Richardson website, www.lwvrichardson.org. There are some copies of those materials available in the foyer this evening. Tonight's forum is being videotaped by the City of Richardson. CITV will broadcast tonight's forum in its entirety from April 25th to May 9th. See tonight's program for channels and times. The forum will be available in its entirety on the League's website and the Richardson ISD website. It takes a lot of volunteers to put on a forum. Many thanks to the volunteers from the League, from willing citizens, and Berkner's National Honor Society students for all of their work to make this evening possible. I'd also like to express our gratitude to the candidates, both for attending our forum this evening and for their public service. We wish them all the best during this election season. The moderator for tonight's forum is Kim Quirk. Kim's a trustee for the Richardson Independent School District. She was first elected in 2005 and has served as the board president for 5 years. She attended Richardson schools for 12 years, graduated from J.J. Pierce High School, as did both of her children. Kim has been active in the North Texas and RISD communities for 25 years. Kim is currently an ex officio member of the Richardson Chamber of Commerce Executive Board. She was on the Chamber's Women in Leadership Committee, where she was the tri-chair of the Education Committee and the Public Policy Committee. She has also served on the boards of the Collin County Community College Foundation, the Richardson YMCA, the New Beginnings Center, Dallas Black Dance Theater, and the RISD Excellence in Education Fund. In an advisory capacity, she has been involved with the Greater Dallas Chamber of Commerce Technology Business Council and Education Committee, the United Way Brand Committee, the Boys and Girls Club of Richardson, the DFW Minority Business Council, Family Place, Plano ISD Teacher of the Year Gala Committee, and the Wilmer Hutchins ISD Closure Communications Advisory Team. Professionally, Kim is a managing director for SunWest Communications, where she provides public affairs and public relations counsel for clients involved in philanthropic programs promoting education. She graduated cum laude from Southern Methodist University. She has successfully completed Leadership Dallas in 2002, Leadership Richardson in 2006, and Leadership of the Texas Association of School Boards in 2008. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, Kim Quirk.
Thank you, Evan. Before we begin, I'd like to review the format for tonight's forum. First, please silence your pagers and cell phones. Flash photography is not allowed during the forum as it is a distraction to our candidates. Candidates in place 1 through 6 are all unopposed and will have a closing statement at the end of our evening. They are sitting in the front row and will be introduced as they are called upon for a closing statement. This is the first election in Richardson's history where the citizens vote for their mayor. The proposition on the ballot in the November 2012 election passed 3-1, allowing direct election of the mayor in Richardson. The 2 candidates running for the Place 7 mayor's position are seated on the stage in the order they will appear on the ballot. In lieu of an opening statement, all 8 candidates have submitted a short biography that is printed and available tonight. Place 7 candidates will participate in a question and answer portion of the forum and will rotate answering first. Mayoral candidates will have 2 minutes to answer each question, and 1 minute for rebuttal. All candidates will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. All questions must be on the cards provided. Put only one question on a card and please write legibly. Address your questions to both mayoral candidates. A question addressed to only one candidate will not be asked. Make your questions clear and concise. Tellers have these cards and will bring you one if you raise your hand. Could tellers raise their hand so everyone knows where you are? They're all around the room. Thank you. When you have written a question on a card, raise your hand and a teller will deliver your card to the screener's table. The question screeners are seated at the table to my left. They are volunteers from the League of Women Voters of Richardson. The screeners are grouping questions by topic to avoid repetition. They will screen the questions according to the League of Women Voters of Texas Guide to Candidates Forum. The timekeepers for the evening are from the League of Women Voters of Richardson and are seated in the front row. The timekeeper will signal candidates with signs marked 30 seconds, 10 seconds, and stop, indicating the amount of time you have left. Now, to introduce the mayoral candidates in ballot order. Place 7, ballot position 1, Mayor Pro Tem Laura Gibbs Maczka. Place 7, ballot position 2, Councilman Amir Omar. Well, let's begin. Candidates, as a reminder, you have 2 minutes to answer each question and 1 minute for rebuttal. For the first question, we will begin with Ms. Maczka. If you are elected mayor, what will be your first priority? And please give specifics on how you will work toward fulfilling that goal.
I'll stand up so I answer the questions. Well, maybe I'll stay seated. If I'm elected mayor, the first thing that I will do will be to work with the team who I'll be serving with, which are the other council members, to establish the short-term goals for the next 2 years. This is a process that I feel could perhaps use some, sorry about that, tweaking. And so I think that specifically what I'll do is visit with the council members to determine whether or not we want to change the way we go about setting our short-term action items. Because this is a very important decision in that it sets the pace for what we will be doing for the next 2 years. There are obvious goals that the city has adopted over the past period of time. We will also look at those to make sure that those are still the primary goals that the city needs to be facing. This process will take place over the summer, and right along that goes hand in hand with this process of setting goals, short-term action items, and long-term action items is the budget. This is something that is really important to the community. We spend most of the summer studying, we spend workshops doing it, and it will again determine the funds that we'll have available to utilize for our short-term action items, and it'll also set how we're going to manage our financial responsibilities.
All right, I'm going to give this a try, although I'm not sure if standing up will work with these particular microphones. Let me just make it easier on the sound guy, and I'll sit down. You know, starting off on the right foot is obviously going to be the very most important thing, and we've had a very important race that we've been in the middle of, and we've got an opportunity actually to step off with the right foot. For me, the very first thing that we can do is we can agree on the process in which we're going to try and go about making the very most happen for our city over the course of 2 years. You know, I think the premise of having one immediate goal is probably a little bit difficult, because what you've seen me do over and over again as a part of this process is really talk about a number of things. Among those are figuring out ways to help our city become even safer. We have a safe city, but the fact of the matter is that there are opportunities for us to be able to lower both violent and nonviolent crime, and those are things that I'm going to be very much focused on. The second thing you've heard me speak about is how it is that we can help our school districts, both RISD and PISD. We've been known as a city with amazing school districts. The fact of the matter is that Austin has made things a little more difficult for our schools to be able to get where they want to go. And so as a city, if you believe that a great city is based on very sound and exceptional schools, then you've got to do everything you can to help those schools. And you'll see me look for opportunities where we can actually work together with both RISD and PISD to help join forces and make a difference in the way they are able to deliver education to our students. And then last, you're going to see me focus on neighborhoods. The fact of the matter is that our number one most important thing is making sure that our residents have the very best place they can call home. And so that focus on making sure that we have the strongest neighborhoods possible is going to be something that you'll see me really work towards. And so yes, there'll be goal setting, but that goal setting needs to have leadership at the front, and that's something that I would provide as mayor.
Ms. Maczka, you have a minute.
One of the advantages of going through this process, and now we're on our 11th debate, is the fact that my opponent and I both get to state what our priorities are for the community. But what I want to make very clear is that while the mayor is being directly elected by the residents and the citizens, it's a team effort that's going to get us through the next 2 years. And so my peers on council have not had the opportunity to publicly state what their top priorities are. I've got 4, which I imagine will come out through the course of the evening. But I think the other thing that's going to be really important for me as the mayor is to listen to them. They've been through these forums, they know what we've been saying, but they too have opinions on what it is that they think needs to be accomplished on behalf of our city. So I think that, again, at the beginning, it will be a process of listening, not only to what I think needs to be done, to what the citizens have provided as input throughout this whole process, which I would be willing to share with my peers on council, but also hearing from them what they think needs to be accomplished.
Mr. Omar?
There's no question that this is going to be a team effort. You have 7 elected officials when it's all said and done. I think the potential difference is that what you're going to see is a person who is not going to be afraid to lead from the front. Someone who is going to be able to state what it is that they're seeing and then begin to find that opportunity to work with the team on those particular issues. You know, I've had an opportunity now to serve you for 4 years, 2 terms. And during that 4 years, what you've seen in my track record is time and time again the ability to work with others to be able to accomplish the things that are necessary to make our city even better. It's something that I'm incredibly proud of. But I haven't always done it just sitting behind the scenes trying to make things happen. Oftentimes I've been willing to take that step forward and be the kind of leader that we need in order to help the rest of the team come together and put together plans that make sense for our city.
Thank you. For our second question, we'll start with you, Mr. Omar. Last week, many citizens in the city of Richardson received a mailing from the Richardson Coalition, a local political action committee. The coalition, which has endorsed Ms. Maczka this year, made negative statements in the mailing about Mr. Omar, including raising serious issues concerning his personal financial management. Do you have anything to say about the Richardson Coalition mailer?
You know, I'm so glad this came up. Somebody told me that it came up in last week's debate, but it didn't come forward as a question, and I think this is a perfect opportunity to be able to talk about this sort of thing. You know, we've got a great city, and one of the things that people were most worried about with a direct election was that potentially one group or another may feel like there was so much at stake that they were willing to say just about anything. And unfortunately, what you saw last week was that come to fruition. The fact of the matter is that there were 3 major claims made about me. And on one hand, what's disturbing, frankly, is the fact that they were willing and interested in going down a personal path versus focusing on the things that really matter to our residents. Things like I mentioned earlier, neighborhoods, crime, schools. But on top of making a personal attack, they ended up saying things that were unequivocally inaccurate. The first thing they mentioned, and you know, quite frankly, it disturbs me to even repeat the words, but I'm going to do it for the sake of getting this out. First thing they mentioned is that I was somehow behind, and not just a little bit behind, on child support. What I can tell you is that today we've provided the Dallas Morning News a stack of papers from the Attorney General's office showing every payment made on time, every time. We have an affidavit stating from my ex-wife that all the allegations are false. The idea, second idea that they brought out there was that somehow I was able to get out of student loans by filing for bankruptcy. I've never made a bankruptcy in 2000 when I was in my 20s something that I hid, but the idea of being able to get out of student loans through a bankruptcy is silly. You can't, and I didn't even attempt to. And so it's those kinds of lies that really we should expect better. And I think Richardson deserves better than what we saw last week and again today.
Well, it didn't take long for this question, and so I too am glad that we'll be able to publicly speak on the mailer that came out from the Richardson Coalition. The mailer was produced by the Richardson Coalition. One of the claims that has been made is that I was part of developing that piece, and that is not true. When I made the decision to run for mayor of Richardson, I made a pledge, and my pledge was that I would run an honest, transparent, and fact-based campaign. I met with Mr. Omar in December and shared these same thoughts with him and had 4 things that I wanted to make clear. Let's not destroy that which we want to lead. Let's remember that at the end of this, we have to own everything that we say and do. Let's hold ourselves in a way that is respectful to the office, and let's remember that there are others that will be affected by how we handle ourselves. I pledged to be honest, transparent, and fact-based. I have not broken that pledge, and I have asked all those who have supported me to do the same. I've also honestly answered any question that anybody might have, because the reality is when you choose to run for public office, and this is a choice that I have made, you recognize that there are going to be certain questions that are going to be asked of you that an average citizen does not have to answer. And I committed and pledged that I would honestly answer any question, even the difficult ones, that might be about me, because it's the collective body of work that you bring into the office. And I will also say that I committed then and now that nothing from my past would reflect poorly on this community or the office which I intend to serve. I have honored that pledge. The coalition put out a piece. They included references to legal documents. When the question was raised, I simply asked the coalition to please put on their website the sources of these accusations. They put them up there for you to evaluate yourself.
Mr. Omar, 1 minute.
I don't have any problem answering questions, and I said earlier I welcome this particular question. But let's get a few facts straight. Laura uses the same consultant as the coalition does. This was a coordinated effort. This wasn't one person was blind from the other. So let's not allow people to try and kind of pull the wool over our eyes. The second part is that I've stated unequivocally that they are incorrect. I have submitted the information that shows that they are incorrect. And what I would hope is that as a leader who wants to be the mayor of our city, that Laura would do the right thing. That Laura would step up and say that she does not agree with the tactic and that she does not agree with people spreading lies just for the effort and just for the ability to be able to gain a public office. Listen, I love this city so much that I would never even consider something like that. And if one of my supporters did something like that, I would be the first. No one would even have to ask, because that's the kind of leader I would be. I would be the first to say, I do not tolerate those kinds of actions.
Ms. Maczka?
Well, the truth is, it was not a coordinated effort. And that's, again, a fact. You know, because I share the same consultant, by the way, the same consultant that my opponent had for the 2 campaigns prior to this one, does not mean anything. It's like saying a marketing company can't represent 2 products. This has not been a coordinated effort. I have intentionally not been involved in the coalition strategies and development of materials because I wanted to show that I am independent. I happen to share a consultant, but my messaging has been by me, and you will see, again, my statement, honest, transparent, and fact-based. This issue is between the coalition and my opponent. This issue is not between me and my opponent. When pushed, I asked for the coalition to put forth the materials that they feel prove the facts of what they were stating. They did that. I made no assessment and I made no comments on it other than to ask them to provide the facts.
Thank you. For our next question, number 3, we'll start with Ms. Maczka. Do you support a citizen commission to review the entire city charter, and do you support placing any changes recommended by that commission on the May 2015 ballot?
Absolutely. The reality of this situation that we're in right now has, quite frankly, put us in the penalty box. There is a part of our charter that is out of step with the rest of the charter, and it may not mean anything, and it probably won't, but the reality is, because this has now been pulled apart as a separate part of the charter, we do need to go through a full-blown charter review. Now, we had the opportunity to evaluate going through a charter review, and I stated at the time, on camera, that if we were going to go through the process of doing a charter review, we owed it to the residents to do it the right way. At the time that this discussion came up, it was January. We knew walking into that meeting that we were going to lose our long-term city manager. And the actual short-term action item was in order to put it on a May ballot. So my statement that evening was simply, if we are going to do this, we owe it to the residents to do it the right way. The last time we did a charter review, there were 32 meetings. I imagine there will be at least that many. And these meetings will need to be open, transparent, perhaps even videotaped. And I think the process of selecting the Charter Commission will take us a great deal of time, and is something that we've got to make sure that we have representation from every aspect of this community, so that when those folks come together to evaluate the way we conduct our business now and in the future, they will be able to take the time and do it right. The good news is we have 2 years legally until we can put it on the ballot. I feel that that is ample time to allow the process to take place, to have input from not only the commission, but the residents as well as the council. And I would imagine that by allowing enough time to do it the right way, the council will support what the Charter Commission recommends.
Absolutely. We had the opportunity in January of last year to discuss this. As a matter of fact, the same evening we discussed this, we discussed whether or not you, the residents, should have the ability to directly elect your mayor. What was interesting about what happened that evening is that it started off with the discussion of whether or not you should have the ability to directly elect your mayor. I stood strong, I stood on principle, and I said unequivocally that you should have the right to be able to directly elect your mayor. Now, during that discussion, unfortunately, Ms. Maczka decided at that time that it did not make sense for you to be able to have an opportunity to directly elect your mayor. But she also said, I would approve it if it was in the context of a full charter review. So I thought, oh, good. That means in a few moments when we talk about the charter review, Ms. Maczka might actually be willing to vote for that. As it turned out, when that issue came up, she voted against that as well. Now, I believe on that second vote, Councilman Mitchell and I both voted to do a charter review. Here's the issue on the charter review. It has been 20 years since we've done a full review. The 20 years previous, we had done 4 or 5 full reviews. We need to make sure that the charter of our city makes sense for today. And the reason why it wasn't reviewed last time was because, quite frankly, there were those who were afraid that in the process of a charter review, you might actually end up getting a vote for mayor. As it turns out, residents took the action into their own hands. I voted for it. She voted against having a direct election of the mayor, and instead, residents had to go and start collecting a petition, getting the signatures, and allowing you to vote, as was stated earlier, 3-1, that you wanted to be able to directly elect your mayor. The fact that we need to do a charter review has nothing to do with that mayoral election. It actually just exacerbates the position and the point and says that people really want to see change, and that's going to be something that we ought to do as a part of that charter review.
So on the rebuttal, I will say that the vote that night was specifically about considering evaluating the direct election of the mayor by the May ballot. What I said that night is I was not willing to consider that separate and apart from a full-blown charter review. The wonderful thing is you can go back and watch the tapes, and I said just that. And when we got to the discussion about the charter review, again, I was concerned about self-interest and the desire to get the direct election of the mayor on the ballot by May, because make no bones about this. My opponent was in favor of this because he wanted to be the mayor. I said, if we are willing to do a full-blown charter review and take the time required, I will jump in with both feet, I think is what my quote was that night. I stand by that. But I also wanted the council to really understand that this was not something that we could quickly do in order to make a 30, 90-day deadline. This was something that we needed to commit the resources, the time, and the energy to do correctly, because that's what the residents of Richardson deserve.
What people really dislike about politicians and politics is that all so often we say one thing and then we do something completely different. Laura, frankly, said, I would be okay with a direct election of the mayor, except I want it to be a part of the charter, so I'm going to vote against this. And then, as a part of the charter, should we do a review of the charter? Well, no, I don't want to do that either. So really, which one is it? Does Laura believe that you had the right to directly elect your mayor or not? I said yes that day, even when it was obvious that the rest of the council was against it. But I did what I knew was right because I was hearing it from you, the residents. They want to say it was about me wanting to be mayor. The fact is that in 2011, from these stages, I said then that I would fight to be able to give you that right. And I did what I promised. I did it even when it was politically difficult, because what we deserve is a principled leader, a person who's willing to be independent and do the right thing every single time.
Thank you. For our next question, we start with you, Mr. Omar. What types of city spending do you think should be financed through the issuance of bonds rather than through property tax?
I think that the way we do things today, for the most part, are probably the best practice and the best way for us to go about it. When it comes to bond spending, what you generally see is us either purchasing long-term assets or building buildings and doing things of that sort. So I think ultimately the reason for the question perhaps is to try and figure out whether or not there are ways that we can run our city government even more efficiently than we do today. Here's the good news. Today we have a AAA bond rating, a double AAA bond rating, which is pretty rare for cities. It's something that we should be proud of, and it's something that the current and previous leaders have really helped us get to. But the fact of the matter is one of the things that I'm proposing is that we actually look at how we can make the most efficient use of our money on an annual basis. I'm proposing that we actually do a top to bottom review of different departments of the city in order to figure out whether or not there are ways that we can do things more efficiently. I'll give you a couple examples. We have the opportunity with technology today to be able to do things that in the past took a lot of legwork or took a lot of paper to kind of accomplish. We have already, in the last 4 years, I think Councilman Dunn came up with an opportunity for us to use a paperless system for some of our billing, and that ends up saving us thousands of dollars. And so those kinds of efficiencies are things that we could more aggressively go find when we do a top-to-bottom review, when we do things like look for best practices. I'm in the midst of getting my executive MBA at UT Dallas right now. As a matter of fact, I graduate one day before the election, and then there's another ceremony the week after. And what I can tell you is that I would like to see us do those reviews the same way that corporate America does when they're trying to find the most efficient way to spend their dollars.
The question was about bonds, correct? Yes. Okay. I just want to make sure that I answered it. There are several ways that the city utilizes bonds, and I'm going to put it in a way that I look at my own personal finances, which is they're short-term bonds. And that's like getting a car loan. And I think that short-term bonds are actually a good way for the city to make purchases for items that don't have a super long life. For example, a fire engine, where the reality of a city with the budgetary needs and quite frankly, the list of needs that we haven't been able to meet, we're not going to have the cash in-house to be able to go out and purchase a fire truck. But we do need to continue to have the most current equipment that our city needs to operate. So the use of short-term bonds are something that I continue to support to pay for such things. Now the bigger issue is the long-term bonds, and those require voter approval, which is necessary. And these are bonds that we use to make investments, long-term investments in things like buildings. And the reality is that the city staff do an amazing job of indexing not only where we are with our current situation, but also projecting some of the things that we're going to need down the road. At this moment, we have identified $300 million in needs that we have not been able to address. So the reality is we are going to have to continue to issue bonds to pay for these long-term investments. Again, roads, buildings, and things like that. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to have tax increases. I think that there is a way, and we have committed as a council, we are very fiscally conservative. And we have been able, through best practices, to be able to reduce our debt. And so I do foresee a scenario where we could potentially issue bonds that would, of course, be voter approved, but would not, in fact, require tax increases. That would be my goal.
Mr. Omar?
Thanks. The reason I talked about top-to-bottom reviews and finding a way to do things more efficiently is because to accomplish what Laura's suggesting here, which is to do things without a tax increase, it's going to take us being able to run an even more efficient government than what we have today. The fact of the matter is that the timeline for the next large bond would not allow us to do it tax-free. And so the way you get there is you get there by finding those efficiencies. And the way you find those efficiencies is by having the willingness to say, let's look at the way we do things and determine whether or not there's a better way to do it. There are so many cities that we can look to find best practices, other people who might actually be doing at least one or two things differently than us and maybe even more efficiently than us. And when we find those opportunities, we have the ability to save those dollars and have those dollars go towards things like paving our streets, paving and redoing some of our alleys. Those kinds of things will lessen the burden of what that next bond will be and allow us to do it in a tax-free manner.
I will respectfully disagree. I don't think that it's out of the question that the next bond election would demand a tax increase. We've got 2 years before we would probably consider that or more. And we've already begun the discussions of looking at the efficiencies. This is not something new. This is something that we do as standard operating procedures. We have been able to reduce the city debt by millions of dollars, and I think that we can continue to do that. You know, one of the best examples is RISD. They recently passed a bond that included no tax increase. I truly believe that if we are careful and look at what we're doing, we could, in fact, hold a bond that would not necessarily increase your taxes.
Thank you. Our next question. How long have you owned a home in Richardson, and is it homesteaded as your primary home? Ms. Maczka, you're first.
I have owned 2 homes in Richardson, and I have owned this second home now we've been in this house 11 years. It is my primary existence. We moved 10 houses down the block from the house that we first bought when we moved back to Richardson 17 years. So all total, I've owned property along with my husband, Mike, who's in the audience here, for 17 years in Richardson. It is our primary residence.
I've owned my current home in Duck Creek for 3 years, and it is my primary place of residence. And I guess what I'll do is, with the few moments that we've got left in my answer, I want to point out something that I think is an important thing that may have just kind of come up in the last part of the discussion, which is this idea of standard operating procedure. You know, there's a little bit of a difference between the two of us when it comes to the desire to actually look at things and determine whether or not there's a way to do things differently versus doing things the way they've always been done. You'll see that as a consistent theme. You'll see a consistent theme that says, I think everything is being done the way it should be done right now, and let's just keep doing it that way forever. And you saw that when she voted to say that you didn't need the ability to directly elect your mayor, for example, or that we didn't need to review the charter. In my case, what you see is a person who is willing to say, let's see whether or not there's an opportunity to make things even better. I don't know that anyone here could say that in a budget like we have of almost $200 million, that it doesn't make sense to do things a little bit differently, to go away from the normal standard operating procedures and find ways to be even more efficient. And that's an opportunity that you can actually improve what's going on versus just stating everything's okay the way it's always been. And so this concept of standard operating procedure, I think, is something that you really kind of got to look for, because a leader is willing to solve problems as they come versus saying we need to do them the same way every time.
Ms. Maczka, you have 1 minute to rebut.
Well, I'm glad that we've kind of gotten down this path because, again, this is a theme that has carried out. For those of you who've been to all the forums, I will say, I typically say in my opening comments that I have been portrayed as someone who thinks that we need to keep doing things the way we're doing. What I'm going to say to you tonight is Richardson is a great city, but we can do better. I am all about innovation. I am all about changing things, but I think that it's really important to fully vet those ideas, to understand where we've come from, to look at the past as a starting point for how we're going to move forward in the future. I've got a record of asking questions too. When I first got involved in the city, I was on the Parks Commissioner, and I questioned a lot of things that we did, and I said that when I ask these questions, it's not because I don't think we're doing things the right way. I think at the end of the day, what we will have is validation that things are going the right way or an impetus to make the change. That's how I will also serve as mayor, and that is how I operate as a leader.
Mr. Omar?
You know, I've heard this kind of comment a few times before, the idea that I'm all about innovation. But I would ask about the track record. You know, over the last 4 years, what you've seen me do is you've seen me find problems and then try to come up with an innovative solution. And that's happened over and over and over again. And it hasn't happened ready, fire, aim, the way it's been described in past forums, but instead it's happened by working with our staff and ultimately working with our council to be able to seek approval and find a way that we can put something together that actually makes a difference in our city. She mentioned her Parks Commission days, and frankly, knowing that Parks Commissioner is what made me one of Laura's very biggest supporters coming into the last election. I loved that spirit, that desire to ask questions and to kind of mix things up. Unfortunately, what's happened is she became a completely different person as council person, and it's been a disappointment. But it's been the kind of thing that I think shows a lack of leadership.
Thank you, and I'll remind you both to stay on topic. Our next question is for you, Mr. Omar. You're first. Richardson is becoming a far more diverse city than it was just 2 decades ago. Can you give examples from your years as a city council member when you advocated on behalf of our minority communities?
Well, I think that's a great question, and let me start by saying that I think the diversity that we have is a strength. You look at our business community, and what you see is business leaders that come from all different parts of the world that are really making a huge impact in our city in terms of creating jobs and really in terms of creating a very valuable tax base from a business perspective. I think if you look at our schools, you can see how many different languages are spoken, and where for so many other school districts that would be something that would be a challenge or a difficulty, our schools have figured out how to make that into an asset that really makes our schools even stronger. The fact of the matter is that when I've had an opportunity to advocate, it hasn't been necessarily for one group or another, but instead for the entire community. It turns out that people of all ethnicities care about having the very best schools they can have. And that's one of the reasons why I got involved with the RISD Excellence in Education Foundation, creating a 5K that could help them raise money and make a difference. People care about crime. People of all ethnicities, they want safe streets. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so proud that both the police and the Fire Association have stepped up and said, this is the kind of leader we want. Someone who is focused on making our streets the very safest they could be. So on one issue after another, what you'll find is that people of all ethnicities care in many cases about the exact same things. And as a leader, what's important is to figure out how to find those common binds and really help those move forward. And that's the kind of leader I've been and the kind of leader I would be as your mayor.
I think one of my favorite things about our community is the diversity. And I will say that diversity is not just based on ethnicity. What is great about this community is you've got original residents and you have those young folks who have just come to our city. And so I think the challenge as a leader and as a council, quite candidly, is to be able to continually recognize that diversity takes all sorts of forms, and that we have got to continue to support and provide services for all residents in Richardson, whether it be based on their ethnicity, their age, the male, female. There are just so many different things that we've got to do, and it's a challenge. I think that the fact that one of the things that I will talk about as my platform, for lack of a better word, is you'll see me advocating for strong neighborhoods. And when I talk about strong neighborhoods, I don't think that every single neighborhood needs to be the same. I think it's wonderful that we have diverse communities that reflect the makeup of the people who are living there. But the one thing that those communities all have in common is the fact that they want to have housing stock that meets their needs. And again, this is going to apply to the young person straight out of college, that family, and even that senior citizen who is on a fixed income. So we've got to continue to provide housing stock that meets the diverse needs of our community and the diverse interests. We've got to continue to support our public school systems because it's a statistic that's thrown around a lot, but there's something like 92 languages spoken in our ISD. What a wonderful opportunity for our students and for our children. I love that. And so I think that we've got to continue to look as a council at ways of engaging all of those different communities in our city and to involve them in leadership roles.
Mr. Omar?
I think one of the things that was just kind of brought up was this idea of housing stock and really how that meets our diverse needs, or what's becoming an increasingly diverse city. And I think from my perspective, again, us trying to adjust housing stock based on what's going on from a diversity perspective, whether it be ethnic or anything else, is probably the wrong way to go about things. As mayor, what you'll see me do is you'll see me be focused on making sure that we are marketing our city in such a way that people will want to come and live here. And make sure that we are considered one of the very best cities to move to. It's frankly, and I got to plug both fire and police, and we might as well talk about the fact that the realtors have come forward and endorsed me because they see me as the kind of leader that will know exactly how to be able to advocate about our city, to be able to speak about our city, and to get people excited about the potential and ability to be able to move to a city that is as great as Richardson is.
And along the lines of specifically advocating on behalf of the diverse communities, I think the thing that we've got to do better as a community is to communicate what's going on there. Every single weekend, you will find cultural events all over this community that represent many, many different opportunities for our residents to learn about communities that they aren't daily exposed to. And so as a council, I think the original question was, what have we done? You know, I've been active. I've gone to all those things. I've taken my children. I've advertised it on my Facebook. And I've encouraged others to come out and see the wonderful, diverse community that we have. DFW Chinatown is one of our best assets. And it's a place that people from all over the Metroplex seek and come to. I think there's lots of DFW Chinatown opportunities in this community. And as a councilman, and more importantly as the mayor, you will see me communicating that those places are there and marketing Richardson as a place to enjoy cultural experiences.
Okay, Ms. Maczka, you're first for this one. The city of Richardson has been under water restrictions for over a year. What can the city do to make easing these restrictions possible?
Well, the reality is that I don't see us ever going back to the way that we have always done business. Water restrictions are the reality of the future. Water is our most stressed resource right now. And as Richardson, I think as a mayor, what I've got to do and what we've got to encourage the council is conservation. We've got to come up with ideas to encourage conservation. Now, the next obvious statement is we are part of the North Texas Municipal Water District, and the way that the current system operates is somewhat counterintuitive to conservation. But this is an opportunity for Richardson to be a leader, to encourage and reward conservation, yet at the same time work with the other member cities, because we have been in discussions, because in order to make any significant change in how we manage this requires the unanimous buy-in from all the member cities. We have gone to the table with our neighboring communities, and I think that this is where my relationships throughout the region that I have been working on will be helpful, because we will be able to come together as leaders from all these communities to try to work on solutions for what is going to be a long-term problem.
So for the most part, I think we're very close on this one. We both believe that conservation is important. It is a reality to the way that we move our city forward, and quite frankly, the way the entire region has to behave. The water district thing, though, is a bigger problem, I think, than maybe what's being led on here. And I think that it's important that we not only identify what the problem is, but try to begin working very proactively on a solution. First of all, we are all told to conserve. You are told as residents to conserve. And at the end of the day, what happens is if we don't buy enough water as a city from the water district because they have a certain amount that they want us to buy, it's called a take or pay system, then at the end of the day, we still write a check for water that we never used. It's a system that doesn't really make a lot of sense, because at the water district level, they should also want us to conserve. And so what we absolutely have to do is we have to create a program that makes sense for every single one of the cities, and that could actually allow us to be able to conserve and not be paying extra for all that water that we're not utilizing. There's an opportunity here to have potentially a leadership role in the region. As Richardson's mayor, I think the question becomes which one of the two of us have proven that we can actually go out and get multiple mayors together all on one page. There's only one of us that's actually done that so far. In 2011, I had the opportunity to bring 40 mayors together to join us in a program that we started right here in Richardson. And the idea is that if you have the ability to bring mayors together, then you have the ability to solve problems like this that cross all the different cities in our municipal water district.
Ms. Maczka?
Well, the rebuttal would be the fact that I, too, have been able to gather a group of regional leaders around an issue. And it's not water, it's transportation. But I led the charge to bring all of the elected officials, including the mayors, from all of the cities from LBJ North, to be involved in a study that's going to be taking place by the Texas Department of Transportation on US 75. This was my idea. We hosted it here. And not only did we bring the mayors, but we brought the council members here as well. And through this process, we have been able to be proactive approaching what I would say is arguably the most pressing issue facing this region is transportation. We are going to be at the table. We are providing information to TxDOT before they come to us with a plan. And so, again, I have a proven statement and a proven example of where I have, in fact, led leaders throughout the region in a very complicated program with divergent interests, and to be able to come up with a unified voice.
Mr. Omar?
The proof that Laura was mentioning there was that she actually hosted, and we as a city hosted the meeting to discuss what was going to happen for 75. So the big kind of accomplishment was convincing other cities that when they finally met to discuss what's going to happen with this study, that meeting took place here in Richardson. That was the big accomplishment. You know, in our case, when we were able to bring 40 cities together, it wasn't just to meet, it was actually to do something. And in this particular case, with water, we can't just hope to host a meeting about water and have them all come to Richardson and call that a victory. We've got to figure out a way where we don't, as a city, pay $1 million a year for water that we're not even using. That's real money. That's the kind of money that fixes roads. And I have the proven track record to be able to bring mayors together and solve these kinds of problems.
For our next question, our first responder will be Mr. Omar. We are concerned about crime in our neighborhood. What is your impression of the crime situation, and what would you do about it?
So I mentioned earlier that we have the endorsement of the Police Association, and you may ask yourself, why is that? And it's because I not only listened to what they had to say, but I was able to fully embrace the current problem and the current issue we have. Let me start by saying we have a very safe city. It's a city that we should all be very proud of, that we should all be very comfortable with. We can walk in our streets and not be concerned. Yet, we have 63 surrounding cities in the Metroplex. D Magazine did an entire listing of the best suburbs. And we ended up ranking in the best suburbs 36th overall, which to me was not good enough. And so I started looking into it. And when I looked, I saw that in nonviolent and violent crimes, we ranked somewhere around 36th and 37th. When I saw that, I said, that's a problem. Now, granted, it's something that I've recently discovered, probably over the last 6 months. And so I began speaking to folks in our police force to figure out what could this be. And ultimately where they point is they point towards the problem of drugs. We happen to have the only city. There are cities that surround us, so we're not the only city, but there are cities who surround us that all have a narcotics task force. That means that they're proactively going after drug dealers and drug enterprises. Garland, Addison, Plano, Dallas. Right in the middle, there's a city without a narcotics task force. This is something that's a problem. Now, you will hear that maybe it's not a problem or maybe we've already got the solution to the problem, but what I would tell you is if the solution is producing a 36th and 37th ranking, it's not good enough for me. And so you would see this as a top priority. One of the things that I would absolutely be laser focused on, because we have to determine how we can get ourselves to be one of the safest cities as opposed to just a safe city.
So I think that this will be a really good opportunity for me to demonstrate the way that my opponent and I go about decision making and idea launching differently. So first of all, foremost, let me again reiterate what Mr. Omar said, is we do have a safe city. We are very, very fortunate to have an outstanding police force. We have done wonderful things in the area of Crime Watch, neighborhood patrols, National Night Out. So I would agree, too, that in general we are a safe city. But you can always improve. Now back to this big idea. So I heard about this narcotics unit, kind of like some of you all are hearing about it for the first time in a forum. Now, this has been presented as a serious problem in our community, that we've got a drug problem, and that the statement that night was that the police chief said we didn't. So I took that very seriously. And so when I am presented as a council member and the mayor pro tem with a statement like that about the city, the very first thing I did was to ask for a meeting with the police chief to say, this is what has been stated. Can you tell me the facts about the situation? I will tell you, my opponent did not meet with the police chief. He talked to the guys on the street. And granted, they have one perspective, but you've got to also take the perspective of the leader who is assigned with the overall look of the department. So when I met with the police chief, what I learned was, in fact, that no one said we didn't have a drug problem. We just go about it in an innovative way. And it's a way, to me, that makes sense. In Richardson, Texas, the biggest drug problem we have is with the guy smoking pot in their house. And if you look at our statistics, you will see that the in-drug user arrests have gone up significantly because all of the guys on the street are trained. We also have a special operations unit whose whole job is to address some of these pressing issues. Time out.
Mr. Omar?
Standard operating procedure versus looking for a way to do it differently. You saw me speak to the people on the street because I wanted to know exactly what they were seeing. I was curious, and I found out the answer. The answer is that it's not just a guy smoking pot in his bedroom. It's a grow house in Breckenridge. Just within the last couple months, there was a house found in the Breckenridge area, nice, beautiful home, with 500 marijuana plants. That's a whole lot of people smoking in their bedrooms, not just one. And so what I would ask you is does that sound like a problem? To me, it does. To me, a drug-related death in Southeast Richardson is a problem. And so we can say, gosh, you know, we've got a great plan and it's going to work out, but 36th and 37th would not be acceptable to me as mayor. And as a leader of this city, I would say I want to look for every way possible to make us the safest city in the Metroplex, not 36th and 37th.
So now to finish my answer, that special operations unit is trained to handle exactly that grow house. There's about 4 of those incidents a year. And so this task force, this group, immediately becomes the narcotics unit. They just aren't called that. So they are trained to take care of those grow houses. And in addition to that, we have a dedicated captain on a DEA task force. Now, again, I'm going to point out a pretty big difference right now, which is when talking to the police chief and the city manager about this idea of a narcotics unit, $1 million a year is what that will cost you. Now, if we've got a problem that's not being addressed, and I was assured by the police chief that these grow house issues are in fact being addressed, I want to ask you, where does that $1 million come from? This is an example of my opponent throwing an idea out to an audience without fully vetting it and not stopping to think about the fact that there's $1 million price tag attached to that idea.
Thank you. Ms. Maczka, you will respond first on the next question. As a general rule, most believe we need less government. How does Richardson fare? Too big or too small?
Well, I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that our government today is smaller than it was even 10 years ago. You know, the city of Richardson takes this very seriously. When we experienced the first financial downturn in the community with the telecom corridor bust, you know, the city took the hard steps then. They froze positions. So I can tell you unequivocally that our city staff and our city government is leaner and smaller than it was back then. Now, I'm the first one to say you can always try to be more efficient, but I also think that Richardson residents demand a high quality of service, and that is what the city is there to provide. So I think that as we're moving forward, what we've got to continually evaluate is the services that we are providing our residents and the costs and the staffing required to do that. Because our citizens demand quality services, and so in order to do that, you're going to have some people actually providing those services. But I do believe that overall we are lean, and I believe that we've got an outstanding city staff who take this job very seriously, who go above and beyond the call of duty on a daily basis, and who are doing more work today than they were back when they had more people on staff.
I agree that we're just about right, but here's what I will add to that. I would add that the reason for a top-to-bottom review is to determine whether or not there are even leaner ways that we can accomplish the same task. By looking for best practices, by doing things like benchmarking against other cities, looking at what another amazing parks department might be doing in another city, maybe in another part of the country, and determining whether or not they have figured out how to solve the problem with less people or spending less city money, those are practices that we ought to look at. Now, as a person who has been in the elected position now for 4 years, I haven't just thought about the idea of how can we do more with less. I've actually been a leader in it. You look at programs that I've championed and that the entire council has approved that I took the lead on. Look at Tree the Town. Tree the Town provided trees that we would have had to pay for up front, and instead found a way to get corporations and nonprofits to help us execute those plantings. Now, my opponent a few times now has taken a jab at this particular program about how much it costs after the fact, and she claims that I said it was a free program. It's never been a free program. What it has been is it's been a program that was designed to actually bring trees in and beautify our city without us having to pay for them up front. Look at McKinney. Look at Plano. Beautiful medians, but they bought those trees. We figured out how to solve it better in Richardson. We took a community garden program, and what we did is instead of doing it like every other city and buying a plot of land and trying to create it ourselves, I reached out to faith-based organizations, and we solved the problem almost overnight, bigger, better, and far less expensive than other cities anywhere in the Metroplex. That's the kind of leader I'm going to be, finding a way to provide those sorts of amenities and improvements to our city without it necessarily having to be a bigger government.
So I think, Mr. Omar, that you would have a number of peers on council who would disagree with your statement. I happened to be on the Parks Commission when the Treat the Town program came up, and it was, in fact, billed as a free program for the community. It's a wonderful program, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it. I just think it's another example of where there was never a discussion of how much this would cost the citizens. $100,000 is what we're in hard costs, plus the watering. But I think it's also a perfect example of what I'm talking about, an additional burden on the staff. The park staff who were charged with implementing this program, 30% of one of those people was pulled off of what they were doing. 30% of her time was dedicated to Treat the Town. Again, this is putting additional strain on an already strained staff. And again, I think it's the example of what I'm talking about. It's throw an idea out there because it sounds great, but not fully vetting it out and not really thinking about both the short-term and long-term implications of that idea.
It's a little bit of revisionist history. As a matter of fact, Treat the Town, the community garden program, any idea that any council person brings forward is fully vetted by staff. It always is, and this one was as well. It was presented by staff because they had vetted it. They had gotten to the point where they were very comfortable with what all the costs associated with it were. And the fact is that Treat the Town, the way that we've designed it, will actually help save. If you were to try and do it the old big government way and plant every tree by the city and pay for it by the city, it would be a $31 million upfront cost that in our case, because we're finding sponsorships and because we're doing it with a nonprofit, it doesn't cost us anything up front. Now, the fact is that the staff is excellent. I think Laura would agree with that. And our council members ask good questions, and I think Laura would agree with that. We asked those questions that night. We got the answers. There were no tricks, and the staff was smart enough to be able to reveal to us exactly what those costs were. But because it's political season, it's time to go against something that we were previously for.
Thank you. Our last question of the evening, we'll start with you, Mr. Omar. How do you propose to manage growth and improve the lives of those living in the Spring Valley area, both east and west of Central Expressway, and do you have a specific plan for revitalizing downtown?
I don't have my own personal specific plan for downtown. We have done a study, and we're still kind of in the process of looking for all the final aspects of what that is. We've gone through the first iteration of the study for downtown, and I think that there's a great deal of potential there. We've got to figure out how to make that area, number one, less traffic heavy, because with all the traffic that goes through there today, there's really no way to do something as grand as we may want to do in the downtown area. As for West Spring Valley, I'm proud to have been on the council 2 terms ago where we took the tough challenge of looking at that area. And I think one of the lessons learned from that process was how very important it is to get resident input. We looked at that and we made sure that we got as much input as possible from neighborhood leaders and businesses to make sure that what we're going to do over there is going to make sense. Now let me say this. Some of what's going on in Spring Valley right now, especially things like taking down the Continental Inn and that sort of thing, are a byproduct of what the council in 2009 to 2011 did. But we have to be able to continue to keep kind of our foot on the gas as it relates to determining how we can make that area even better. The challenge we have is that today, and really every day that it stays in the same condition it's in, there are a lot of old apartments there. There is quite a bit of crime in that area. And frankly, again, there are quite a few drugs in that area. And we've got to do what we can to be able to make that area as safe as possible while we wait to get it to the redevelopment level that we want to see it at.
So I think that the redevelopment of Spring Valley is quite candidly one of the most crucial issues facing our community. It is an example of a neighborhood that has begun the process of reinvestment and revitalization, but It also represents urban creep. And, you know, it is not a problem that's just limited to the south part of the town. It is the gateway to our city, and it's that first edge when people come to Richardson. And I think we have got to put a lot of time, energy, and resources against making a mark on the Spring Valley, because like cancer, you don't know where it's going to creep to, but it is going to move, and it's going to continue moving into other parts of the city. Now, I think that we're going to have to look at a different way of doing it. You know, there is an outstanding plan in place that did, in fact, involve a whole lot of citizen input. But how are we going to begin the practice of implementing that plan? And so what I think we're going to have to do is we're going to have to look for some alternative funding. Redevelopment is time-consuming, and it is expensive. And so I think that the only way we are really going to make some progress down there is to bring in outside private funding. We're going to have to look for those businesses or developers who are willing to do a public-private type partnership in order to accumulate what I would consider to be contiguous sections of land so that we can begin doing things like tearing down the apartment complex that causes so many problems there. But the only way we're going to be able to do that is to be able to purchase that property, and we're not going to be able to do that with the resources we currently have. So we're going to have to think outside the box. We're going to have to go seek those partners who want to co-invest with us. Now, with Main Street, I will quickly answer this in probably the 20 seconds that I have left. I don't think we hear anything more often from residents than what are we going to do about Main Street. We are in the middle of a study, and I will tell you that one of my goals as the mayor will be to put our flag in the ground and say, let's do something. Let's start with Main Street redevelopment.
Mr. Omar?
At the end of the day, this is going to be about what kind of leader you have at the helm. If you have someone who has a track record of being proactive, being able to get out there and getting people interested in an area, then I think what you see is those changes happening a little bit faster. I'm exactly that sort of leader. I'm the kind of person that will reach out to developers, that will reach out to investors, that will have those meetings take place and be so much more a proactive aspect of us making that redevelopment happen. The fact of the matter is that the council's will is what is most important when it comes to these things. And I've been proud to serve on now 2 councils that have had the will to say that we need to make certain that redevelopment continues to be a priority. And so at the end of the day, it takes a leader that's willing to go out there and drum up the business, but it also takes a council that's willing to be committed, as it has been thus far, to making sure that redevelopment happens and make sure that it happens the right way.
Well, in my rebuttal, I'll give an example of where I have actually been very proactive in going out and meeting with developers before the project even came to the city. There's another redevelopment project that's in the works that's going to be taking place between George Bush and Campbell Road, Palisades. That's going to involve massive redevelopment. And rather than waiting for it to come before the city, the council, I met with the owners of the land. And I involved the entire neighborhood that will be directly affected by this decision. We held charrettes. I was part of a proactive approach so that by the time that those folks actually come to the city, they will have gotten a lot of feedback from a lot of residents who are directly impacted by their decision. And it will be an example of me reaching out to them to help them understand what it is that we're looking for rather than them presenting something to us and us reacting.
Thank you. As we come to the end of our evening, all 8 candidates on the ballot have 2 minutes to give a closing statement, and we will do that in reverse order ballot. Each candidate will have 2 minutes, as I stated earlier. And one correction I'd like to make, if you look at the back of your program, it says that early voting begins April 24th, which is today. That is incorrect. It starts on Monday, April 29th. So we'll begin with you, Mr. Omar. You have 2 minutes.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank my son for making it out to this forum. It's always exciting to be able to kind of show by example what it is that the political process is all about. And I want to thank all of you, not only for being here, but for giving me the opportunity to lead in these last 4 years and to give back to a community that I love in a way that really makes a difference. You know, I've always taken this opportunity seriously. It's been an honor. And what I've wanted to make sure I did was always be willing to lead from the front, especially when it was an issue that mattered to you. If it mattered to you, it mattered to me. And that kind of leadership, the leadership that I have shown over the last 4 years, is exactly why we've been able to pick up the endorsements that we've been able to pick up. Having the Realtors Association, the people who are on the front lines of selling our city, say that you are the right person to be the leader of this city is exactly something that I am proud of. If you look at the Fire Association and the Police Association, both willing to come forward and say that you are the right kind of leader, that's something to be proud of. They did it because I had a track record, because I had a vision for our city that could really make a difference. But they also did it because I was the kind of leader that was willing to stand on principle, especially when it mattered most. One example, when we decided whether or not you should have a vote, I was willing to stand with you, even though it was politically difficult. And so, although some people, and I think at previous forums we've seen a little bit of a belittling of some of these different groups that have endorsed me, I think what you need to know is these are the people on the front lines of our city, the people who really see everything as it is. And when they had an opportunity to sit down with both of us and examine the choice and examine the visions, they said loud and clear, Amir Omar ought to be the next mayor of Richardson. I would love to have your vote, and I look forward to being your next mayor. Thank you.
Ms. Maczka?
I too would like to thank everybody for coming tonight. We have been at this for quite a while, and we're now moving towards the finish. And y'all will soon have the opportunity to make a choice as who you want to vote as the most public official in your community. And I will tell you that when you vote to elect me as your mayor, you will be electing a mayor whose only special interest is the long-term interest of Richardson, Texas. You will be electing a mayor who understands that the role of the mayor and the council is to set vision and policy and to demand that the very capable and competent staff that we have take that vision and policy and enact it. And you will have a mayor who will fully vet ideas before they're presented in public by talking to residents, by talking to experts, and by talking to my peers on council, so that when I bring forth an idea or when an idea comes forth, we will have taken into consideration the long-term consequences and implications financially that those decisions will have on this community. Now, there is a reason that every single one of the current council members, except for my opponent, along with the majority of every other elected person who has come before them, and the Dallas Morning News, have chosen me as their choice for mayor. Because they understand that it's the collective body of work that I bring to this office that makes me the best choice as Richardson's most public person. They aren't doing this because they don't want to change. They understand that when you elect me as a mayor, you understand that public service is the ultimate in team sports, and that my history of teamwork and collaboration and successfully bringing projects to conclusion is why I would love to have your support as the mayor of Richardson, Texas.
Thank you. Place 6, Mr. Steve Mitchell.
Well, I have to tell you, it's quite an honor to have to go after this illustrious crowd right here. But first of all, I want to tell you that it's been a pleasure to have served you as your council member in Place 6 since 2005. I am currently running unopposed. I will tell you that since 2005, I have been your advocate for revitalization, redevelopment, and reinvestment in your community. You know, we've made a lot of progress during that time, but we still have a lot of ways to go. We've talked about bond packages. We've heard a lot about bond packages. We've heard a lot about plans. Now it's time to really start to implement those plans and continue making a difference. So again, it's my pleasure to serve in this capacity. I want to thank the League of Women Voters to hosting this tonight. Thank you to Kim Cork, who is our moderator, and Evan Thomas as the Master of Ceremonies. It's truly the city, what makes the city great is the team effort that goes into making it great. So I would ask for your vote, even though I'm unopposed. Steve Mitchell, place 6. And my wife actually told me if I made it short, I probably would get a few more votes. So, again, thank you very much.
In place 5, Mr. Paul Velker.
So I am the proverbial new kid on the block. I'm running for place 5, City Council, and I am unopposed. My name is Paul Velker. I think I'll take the 2 minutes to just inform you who I am, because many of you may not know. I'm not related to Paul Volcker, but I do get that question a lot, the past Federal Reserve Chairman. I was born and raised in a small town in Iowa. My wife and I attended William Penn University. I have a degree in business administration. Chris and I have one 15-year-old son, and I moved here right out of college to Campbell Road, working for Hewlett-Packard. I've worked there for 29 years, and just this last year I moved over across the street to Richardson, into Erickson. I'm a product of Telecom Corridor. Chris and I have owned 2 homes in Richardson. We had a home in Prairie Creek, and most recently, the last 6 years, we've lived in near the Breckenridge Park area, and I'm currently the HOA president of the Reserve at Sharps Lane. People ask me, why would you want to do this? There are days I think all of us probably ask that question of ourselves. But mine comes from community involvement that I've had in the past. And I think of City Council as a natural extension of that. How did I get involved with the community? A couple of guys actually pulled me off to the side a few years ago. One was Art Roberts, who is an executive at MCI, a good friend of mine. And another one, sadly, is no longer with us. His name's Dave Peters. He was the chairman of the chamber at the time. They asked me to take on Leadership Richardson, which I did. And you learn so many great things about this city through that process. I became chairman of the Chamber of Commerce. I was ex officio board member of the MTBC. I've served as advisory boards on RISD and UTD, and I've helped form Crime Patrol Unit 20 in the Breckenridge area. And I currently just resigned as the Zoning Board of Administration. A little bit of background on me. I have brochures out in the hallway if you'd like more detail. Thanks.
In place 4, Mr. Kendall Hartley.
Good evening. My name is Kendall Hartley. I'll be in place 4 this time. I'm currently in place 5. I appreciate y'all giving us the opportunity to serve y'all for 2 more years. I'm going to take it a little bit from Steve and keep it short for you guys tonight because y'all came to see these 2 people this evening, and look forward to working with Richardson, the staff, and everybody again for 2 more years. Thank you very much.
In place 3, Mr. Scott Dunn.
Well, thank you. Welcome. I'm going to keep it short also. I'm Scott Dunn in place 3, unopposed like all my other colleagues out here other than the 2 up here on stage. I do have a Facebook page. If you want to understand more about me, I'll post all my questionnaires from the league and the realtors and also the bike-friendly Richardson. So please visit it. I do appreciate serving you for the last 2 years and look forward to serving you for 2 more. Thank you very much.
Mark Solomon in place 2.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you, League, for having us here tonight, and thank all of you for the opportunity of serving you the last 4 years. I'm looking forward to it these next 2 years, being a peer. As we were being called all night, I enjoy being a peer, and looking forward to working with you to make Richardson a better place for all of us to live, work, and play. Please vote for me. It's going to be a hot race, and so I need all the support I can get. So please vote for us on May the 11th. Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, Mr. Bob Townsend in place 1.
Well, thank you very much, Kim. What a great turnout this has been tonight, and it's really been an honor to serve you on the City Council since 2001. So I'm the old man in more ways than one on the council. But it's been a pleasure to serve 4 years as Mayor Pro Tem, and then the last 2 years as Mayor of the City of Richardson. It is truly an honor to serve. I'm very proud of the work that this council has done in the past 2 years. I think we've made tremendous progress. I think Richardson is a great place to live, and I'm proud of being a part of this community. You know, if I didn't like Richardson, I wouldn't be here, you know, and I really wouldn't. But I'm proud of Richardson. I'm proud of the other councils that I've served with. They set the example for the work that this present council has done. We owe an awful lot to those prior councils as well as the present council. But there's a lot going on in Richardson. I'm proud of the work that's going on, economic development, revitalization, and so on. I just hope that we can continue to do the right thing for all the citizens of Richardson. And one more thing I just want to add. It is so important. Please get out and vote on May the 11th, or early voting starting on the 29th. You get out to vote. I'm probably preaching to the choir right here, but get out to vote, but get your family and your friends out to vote also. Thank you very much, and I would like to really thank the League and Kim Quirk for serving as the moderator. Let's give them all a big hand. And also my neighbor, Evan Thomas over here, who's serving as the Master of Ceremonies tonight. So thank you, Evan. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you to our 2 mayoral candidates. And again, please join me in giving all of our candidates a round of applause.
Thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you especially Kim. Moderating a forum like this can be a pretty daunting task, and you moderated tonight very beautifully. And we thank you again for your time and your involvement this evening. Thank you again, everyone, for coming, for your attention, and for your participation this evening. And if you decide to vote early here at the Richardson Civic Center, I'll see you at the polls starting next Monday. Yeah.